esteemed audience and all parties who share a common appreciation of the radar domain. My name is Rene Thaens and I work for the NATO Communication and Information Agency, or NCIA. After a career of 20 years in the Royal Netherlands Air Force, I joined NATO in 2001, working for the Command and Control Division at that time. In a virtual sense, I'm now standing in front of you to introduce the NATO CI Agency and our interest in the radar domain. We have a long pedigree going back to the former SHAPE Technical Center, and as such have been involved in radar networking, and all kinds of sensing technologies to keep the NATO territory and its nation safe for over 6 decades. In the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will share our view and our interest in the radar domain with you. I am available for questions at the end of this presentation. If you'd like to get in touch in any other way after this European Radar Week, you will find my details on the last slide. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a fruitful and pleasant European Radar Week, and I hope to meet you in person sometime in the near future. The NATO CI Agency is one of a number of NATO agencies, with our headquarters co-located with the NATO headquarters in Brussels and supported by a number of other locations. One of these locations, NCIA The Hague, hosts the scientific and technical part of the agency, focusing on communications, cyber and information technology. For historical reasons, the area of Joint Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance, or JISR for short, has been grouped together with the Communications, Command and Control and Information Technology domains. Therefore, NCIA The Hague hosts a highly specialized business unit providing so-called JISR services. The domain of electronic warfare and sensors is a key part of these JISR services. Although the domain references sensors, our focus is mainly on primary and secondary radar and direction finding capabilities in several frequency bands. The structure for this presentation is as follows. As not all of the audience will be aware of the JISR services in NATO, I will start with a brief introduction of this overarching domain. Secondly, I will present an overview of the portfolio of the Electronic Warfare and Sensors branch to demonstrate the many ways in which we connect to NATO's radar domain. I will continue with sharing our ambition as the Electronic Warfare and Sensors branch, followed by a number of scientific technical innovations which are highly interesting. Most likely, some, if not all of these innovations, will start to appear in current and future sensor capabilities which we will deploy across NATO. Without taking too much of your valuable time, which you should use to listen to highly interesting and important conference presentations, I will finish shortly with some conclusions and findings. Part 1. Introduction. The NCIA is one of 2 major NATO agencies dealing with the delivery of services to NATO and NATO nations. Traditionally, our sister agency NSPA in Luxembourg handles all logistics, support and infrastructural matters, where NCIA deals with the procurement and the technical scientific support of the communications and information domain. As already mentioned, the NCIA hosts a highly specialized service center exclusively dedicated to the combined field of intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. And like all modern business units, we also have to have a mission, which is assuring NATO's ISR capabilities of today while preparing for tomorrow's ISR needs. That's nice, but the pictures already give you an impression of the areas covered by GISR. You may have recognized the Fixed Position Air Defense Radar, the AWACS Airborne Early Warning Aircraft, and the new Ground Surveillance UAV, which recently came into service. The key delivery areas for GISR services can be loosely aggregated into the following groups. 1. ISR applications. This area deals with architectures, the development and the production of ISR applications in use by NATO forces, like intel applications, biometrics, and automation of the intel collection cycle. The second group is the ISR operations support, which covers all of our direct assistance to NATO operational units like NATO Airborne Early Warning, Alliance Ground Surveillance, and coalition forces operating in various theaters like Afghanistan or Iraq. In the middle you will find the third group, the electronic warfare and counterterrorism. I will come back to this on the next slide. The fourth group is geospatial services, which combine geo and meteorological intelligence to produce meaningful operational output like maps and METOC reports. Finally, you'll find space services. NATO recognized space as the fifth warfare dimension last year, which has resulted in the establishment of a NATO Space Center within the Operational Command ACO. Space will be addressed later as well. The Electronic Warfare and Sensors branch has a wide orientation, which is captured on this slide. This slide does not pretend to be exhaustive, but shows a number of current activities in which our specialists are involved in. These activities range from research and development, to procurement and implementation, up to the operational support in many theaters. As such, you will find our girls and guys all across NATO, working with industries and with the NATO nations' armed forces, and obviously also including the out-of-area operations. Part 2. The radar domain in NATO. The current NATO air surveillance capability hinges on the following pillars. 1. The surveillance backbone is formed by fixed position air defense radars, or FADRs, based on requirements dating back to 1998. As the network of FADRs is not always able to meet NATO's minimum volumetric coverage, these backbone systems are supplemented by additional gap fillers or by mobile air surveillance radars. A particular example of such a gap filler is the NATO Airborne Early Warning Aircraft, the AWACS, which carries its own long-range radar on the back. All of these sensors are connected through a rather rigid C2 or command and control system, for which a successor is currently under development. As seems true for any existing system, there are a number of opportunities for improvement on the horizon. The first one is the emerging sensor technologies, of which the European Radar Week is a great example. We see paradigm shifts in sensor network architectures. There is a lack of standardization if equipment comes from the industry but is not yet integrated into the military domain. And finally, not a true opportunity but more a challenge, is replacement or updating of existing structures is always costly, both in money and time. NATO's ambition is to defend the NATO territory. Sometimes, the best defense is to prevent harm from reaching your territory. The past decade has shown that NATO now develops a wider reach where NATO forces operate outside the established infrastructure. Obviously, the ISR capabilities need to support this new way of operating, and therefore the existing air surveillance infrastructure requires modernization. In recent years, NATO has rapidly expanded the surveillance capability beyond the fixed position radar systems. In the following slides, I offer you a very quick look into three emerging capabilities, starting with the Alliance ground surveillance, followed by counter-UAV, and finally with space as the fifth dimension. Ground surveillance is a new capability, with 5 UAVs operating from NATO base Sigonella in Italy. In addition, NATO is obtaining more and more access to national assets with sensing capabilities. And as such, GMTI, SAR and ISAR have found their way into NATO over the past years. This introduction is not for free, obviously, but requires tailored approaches towards big data processing, training, logistics, and some other challenges as well. The second expansion area is the counter-drone or counter-unmanned aerial vehicle or system capability. NATO is in the process to acquire the first counter-UAS systems to protect a number of locations in Afghanistan. Such a system must be multispectral, where radar data is fused with direction finder data and video. The nature of the drone detection problem requires cognitive radar and dedicated signal processing to detect and classify drones correctly. The target RCS is very small. The dynamic motion model is complex, and drones tend to operate in high clutter environments. Finally, space is an emerging warfare domain which presents both opportunities and challenges for sensors. Although it will not impact the sensors itself a lot, the opportunity to use space-based platforms to deploy these sensors is a significant step forward. How this will develop for NATO is yet to be seen. Part 3. A look into the future. Before listing a number of highly interesting innovations that we see in the radar domain, it is important to share our ambitions with you. In the old days, the NCIA actively participated in research and development, but has since then migrated towards a role of smart buyer. Despite this role of smart buyer, there is still a minor component of research in our portfolio, because 1. We have to stay smart, so we need to keep on learning. 2. Rapid development and prototyping can support operations and exercises while helping us to draft sound requirements for future procurements. And 3. There is still the professional curiosity of our specialists. As a branch head, I see it as my ambition for my branch to expand the scale of our research and development again by cooperation with national institutes, academia, and the industry. One sensor we don't have is a reliable crystal ball to look well into the future. But then again, we don't need one because we have venues like the European Radar Week, where the smartest of the smartest present their research in the radar domain. From our own observations, we see a number of incredibly interesting and necessary innovations, which ultimately may end up in future NATO capabilities. Not claiming to be complete, and in no particular order, these innovations are autonomous systems, which are able to adapt to the environment and to the scenario, like cognitive radar, intelligent scheduling, and dynamic reconfiguration of systems. Improved signal processing, like quantum computing, data-driven solutions based on machine learning or artificial intelligence, compressed sensing, and the like. Distributed sensing. Sensing capability distributed more towards individual end users sharing information instead of a single stovepipe radar system. Like in the Internet of Things, we expect that in the future every entity on the battlefield will be able to collect and process information towards a common operational picture. Human interface. From the game industry, we see developments where virtual reality and virtual augmentation can allow for innovative ways in which operators manage their sensors. And not just that, but also then digest the output of these systems. Imaging capabilities. Modern sensor fusion algorithms already allow for combining the output of very dissimilar systems in wide frequency ranges into a single image. Finally, on a more technical level, the introduction of a number of novel sensing principles like noise radar, OFDM systems, millimeter wave or higher frequency radar systems, or frequency hopping MIMO systems. This list of innovations is obviously not exhaustive, and any future invention, any future research that expands this list is more than welcome. Part 4. Conclusion. From the previous couple of slides, I have shown you that, despite its admirable age, the radar domain keeps evolving through significant innovations. These innovations will allow NATO as intelligent user to expand ISR capability in the near future, in terms of system capability and operational domain. Ventures like the European Radar Week provide necessary platforms for manufacturers, academia, operators and other customers to meet and exchange ideas. The NATO CI Agency is honored to participate in such stimulating events and is looking forward to extend cooperation with interested parties. Thank you very much for your attention. Feel free to reach out to continue any discussion you like. My details can be found on the next page. Enjoy the European Radar Week. Thank you.